Hi, this is the second video in a series about NuTone apartment house intercom systems, specifically the NuTone Model 478, or what's called the System 4 entry intercom system. If you haven't watched the first video, I recommend that you do. It covered the basic installations of a basic 478 system. It showed the different components of the system, and it shows how the system is wired up. Video number 1 covers a standard installation. We began with a single entry door building with one apartment, and then towards the end of the video I showed how you can expand the system into multiple apartments with multiple units. Today's video is the next level up of 478 systems, and in today's example system we now have a two-entry building. So you have perhaps an east lobby or a west lobby, or my example is going to be it's a north lobby and a south lobby on a fairly large building. I'm not going to go over all of the great details about how the apartment house amplifier wires to the remote intercom stations, because having a dual entry building doesn't affect at all how the 478 control amplifier wires to the apartment stations. That's covered extensively in the first video, so you should watch that. Having a dual entry building has more to do with the basic intercom equipment, the control equipment for the system, than it does with the apartment wiring or the apartment speakers. First, let's go over the basic equipment that you need in a NuTone 478 dual entry intercom system. The heart of the system is the 478 amplifier, which is represented here. To make a true dual entry building, you do have to use a NuTone Model 469 module, and it's referred to, or NuTone called it out as, it's called an auto call transfer module. And the auto call transfer module takes the place of the standard terminal board that is normally mounted on the 478 amplifier. Once you've removed the standard terminal board on the 478 amplifier and you've installed the 469 auto call transfer module, you also have to install both of the door timer modules that come with it, and those modules are the 467 and 468. 467 is the first door and postal lock timer, and the 468 is the second door timer. And those actually came with the 469 auto call transfer module kit when you purchased it, and those plug into the sockets inside the 478 amplifier. By changing the terminal board and adding the 469 auto call transfer module, the layout of the terminal board is different, and we'll review that shortly. The other basic equipment that you would have in a two-entry building are, you would have two entrance directories. So down here at the bottom we have entry directory number 2, and it has its own entry door speaker, which we called entry speaker number 2. And here's our entrance directory. It has 5 push buttons for 5 different apartments, and it also has down here an indicator light, which we'll talk about as we move along. And then up here we have entry directory number 1 with its own entry speaker number 1. And here's our matching 5-button entrance directory, and it has an indicator light on it also. Of course, if you have 2 entries into a building, you're going to have 2 different door releases. So we have door release number 1 and door release number 2, and those correspond to the entrance directories that are numbered 1 and 2. Of course, we have a NuTone 301T transformer. It's the same transformer that's used on all 478 systems, and it's 16 volts at 30 VA. And because in this particular building the mailboxes are inside the lobbies of the buildings, you have 2 postal locks. You have postal lock number 1 and postal lock number 2, and they're associated with entrance number 1, entrance number 2, and also door release number 1 and door release number 2. So you have basically double the amount of equipment because you have 2 entrances. The purpose of the 469 auto call transfer module is to give the apartment residents some control over which entry they're speaking to, which door they're releasing, which gives the building a higher level of security, and it also gives the residents more privacy when they're speaking to someone at one of the entrances. The terminal board on the 469 auto call transfer module essentially splits in half, and it duplicates different connections that are identified for either directory number 1 or directory number 2. It doesn't change the basic wiring of the apartment house intercom stations as they would be done in a standard single entry 478 system. You still have your basic audio 1, audio 2 control and ground wires like you have in every 478 intercom system, and wires from these terminals travel throughout the building and connect onto their appropriate terminals on the apartment stations. That's covered in great detail in video number 1, and I'm not going to go over it in this video. Go watch the other one and see how that hooks up. The other thing which is similar is you have 2 ring common terminals, one for directory number 1 and one for directory number 2, but you still have a single ring wire on each apartment station, and I'll show you how to accomplish that when you have 2 entries. Before we get into the wiring of a 469 auto call transfer module, let's talk about how it operates in the real world. So let's say that entrance number 1 is on the north side of the building and it's near the main parking lot. And entry number 2 is on the south side of the building, and it's off the common area where the buildings surround the swimming pool that's between the buildings of the complex, because of course these are nice apartments and they have a swimming pool. Also, to make it even more interesting, the main entry number 1 is on a different level of the property than number 2. It's actually 1 floor higher. So directory number 1, which is the parking lot entry, that's 1 level higher than entrance number 2 at the pool, which is 1 level lower. There's actually a staircase between the lobbies that you can go up and down, and of course the building has an elevator. So how does the 469 auto call transfer module actually operate? Because the 469 has 2 sides to it. It has a directory number 1 side and a directory number 2 side, and the entrance directories are wired to their appropriate sides on the module. It actually tells the system where the visitor is when they walk up to the directory and push a button. So this is how it works in the real world. Let's say that the pizza delivery guy shows up and he's on entrance number 1 because that's the parking lot side of the building, and he's there to deliver a pizza to apartment number 3. He walks up to the directory, he pushes the button to number 3, and since entry directory number 1 is wired to the terminal, the side of the terminal board that associates with directory number 1, the intercom system and the module knows that the visitor is at entrance number 1. When he pushes the button for apartment number 3, the auto call transfer module automatically locks out and disables the entrance directory at number 2 at the pool side. As it locks that out, it does create the ringtone that's sent to the speaker in apartment number 3, and the resident who's waiting for the pizza can talk and listen to the delivery person and then choose to unlock the door release to let him in so he can deliver the pizza. The reason that this is important in many buildings is you can accomplish a 2-entry system without an auto call transfer module, but when you do that, you can wire up 2 entrances to a standard 478, and yes, it will work. However, when you do that, when the pizza delivery guy pushes the button to number 3, it does not lock out the second entrance because both entrances would be treated the same. They're both equal, and when the apartment resident talks back and forth, the conversation would be heard out of both entrances at the same time. So someone who was standing on the pool side could overhear the conversation that the resident is having with the pizza delivery guy. Also, when the resident releases the door, if it's not set up correctly, they can unlock both doors simultaneously or at the same time, and both doors could be pushed open. So if someone was perhaps lying in wait at the second door waiting for someone to unlock it. They could simply push it open and walk into the building, and your building security is then compromised because you have an unauthorized person wandering the hallways of your building. So as a quick review, pizza delivery guy shows up, pushes the button on entrance number 1 for apartment number 3. The system automatically locks out directory number 2. It creates the ringtone that's sent to apartment number 3. The resident apartment number 3 can talk and listen to the pizza delivery guy and then unlock the door for entrance number 1 so he can enter the lobby. While all of that is going on, the indicator light on directory number 2, which is represented here by the little green light bulb, will be blinking. And it will continue to blink as long as the system is in use. And the reason that it was designed that way is, let's say that another delivery person with Chinese food showed up and he happened to go to the pull side of the building to call the person in apartment number 5. Without the blinking light, he wouldn't know that the system was in use, that somebody was using the system, and he may push the button number 5 on his entrance and it won't work because that directory has been locked out. So the flashing light is an indicator that the system is in use, and it works vice versa. If the pizza delivery guy came to entrance number 2, then the system would lock out entry number 1. So the system knows where the visitor is based on where the first button push has occurred. The auto call transfer module will continue to lock out the unused directory as long as the resident is talking and listening to the visitor. Once they stop operating the controls on their N45 apartment speaker, there is an adjustment on the 469 transfer module that sets the timeout length once the controls have stopped operating. And normally you would set that for somewhere between maybe 10 and 15 seconds. You don't want to lock out the second entry any longer than necessary once the system is not in use anymore, because it prevents other people from using the system. So it's a fairly easy system to operate. It gives added security to most buildings, and in reality, the auto call transfer modules, for the most part, are fairly trouble-free. When they do have a problem, they typically can be repaired. They're not a terribly complicated addition to a standard 478 amplifier. So let's go ahead and take a look at what it takes to wire in a 478 dual entry building system that incorporates the 469 auto call transfer module. The thing you have to remember is a lot of it is duplicated. The connections are duplicated for directory number 1 and directory number 2 because both sides are treated equally. So we'll start with entrance number 1 because that would seem to be the best place to start. So here at the top of the module, again as a review, we have our standard 4-wire 478 intercom system wiring. We have A1, which is audio 2, A2, which is, A1 is audio 1, A2 is audio 2, and control and ground, and those travel through the building and connect to the appropriate terminals on the back of the N45 apartment stations. You also have your 16-volt AC connection here, which is what powers the 478 system. So we're going to go ahead and draw in that. And we'll use some red wires, and all you have are a pair of wires that come from the 301T transformer, and it connects to one screw and then to the other screw. And that's how we power our system. That's the same type of connections that's done on a standard 478, but they're in a slightly different location on the terminal board. The other wires that we have here in the upper section of the terminal board of the 469 are these two connections. We have lamps and ground. And this ground is different than this ground up here. This is lamps and ground for the indicator lights on the two directories. And the way that normally would be wired is an individual pair of wires. A pair means 2 wires to a pair. And so you would have one wire from the lamps terminal to one side of the indicator bulb and another wire from the ground to the other side of the indicator bulb. So that's pretty basic. Then we have, for directory number 1, our 4 sets of terminals on this side of the terminal board. For directory number 1 is we have postal lock, door release 1, speaker 1, and ring common. So most of this should be pretty obvious to most people. If you're going to wire up the postal lock, you run a pair of wires from the number 1 postal lock down here. The wires would run up, connect to one terminal of the postal lock, and the second wire would follow it and connect to the other terminal. So now we've wired in our postal lock number 1. We have to wire up our door release number 1, and again it's a pair of wires from one side of the door release to one terminal and the other side of the door release to the other terminal. So that's all pretty simple. Our next connection is speaker number 1. Speaker number 1 is the entry speaker at entrance number 1, and this is our representation of a speaker cone, and that very simply will wire with a pair of wires. We'll go the long way around and to one terminal, and the second wire follows it and it wires onto the second terminal. So now we have our postal lock wired in, our door release wired in, and our number 1 entrance speaker wired into the system, along with the indicator light on entrance number 1. So the next step is where it gets a little bit more tricky, so you have to pay attention now. We have to wire up the ring common wire for this directory. And as I showed in the first video, the purpose of the ring common wire is to complete the circuit between the 478 amplifier, and in this case it has the 469 module on it, through the button and then to the correct individual apartment. So for this example, we're going to call this over here, this is apartment number 1. And so here on the top of the directory is the button for apartment number 1, and then of course we would have 2, 3, 4, and 5. So the way this is done is you have to take a single wire from the ring common for directory number 1, and you're going to run the ring common wire across and up to one side of button number 1. Now the ring wires in every 478 apartment system are unique and individual to each apartment. So while the audio 1, audio 2, control and ground wires are common throughout the entire building, the ring wire here is individual to apartment number 1. So again, we have ring common. From the ring common terminal, the wire travels up to one side of the button, and then from the other side of the button there would be an individual wire that travels to that apartment and connects to the ring terminal. The circuit that this creates is, it's a switch between the ring terminal on the speaker and the ring common terminal on the terminal board. If you were to eliminate the switch and run the wire straight through, the ringtone would be heard in the apartment continuously, never ending, because there's no switch to break the circuit and stop the tone. So the way this works is when someone pushes button number 1 on the directory, it completes the circuit, it creates the ringtone in the speaker. As soon as the visitor releases the button, the ringtone stops. Of course, since we have 5 apartments in our building, we need to run 5 individual ring wires, one from each button, but each button also has to have a connection to the ring common, and the way that's normally done is on the back of the directory between the buttons, you simply run a jumper wire between the left-hand side terminal of each button like this. So essentially they're all looped back to the ring common terminal, and then when it comes time to run the other individual apartment ring wires, you would run an individual ring wire from the right hand side of button number 2 to apartment 2, the right hand side of button number 3 to apartment 3, and so on for 4, and so on to 5. So this would be 2, 3, 4, and 5 apartments. And that way everybody gets their own individual ringtone, and you don't have multiple apartments being rung all at the same time with the incorrect visitors pushing the button. So as you can see, as a review, before we move on to hooking up entry directory number 2, we have our postal lock switch for door number 1 wired to the postal lock terminals for directory number 1. We have our door release for door number 1 wired to our door release terminals for door number 1. We have our entry door speaker number 1 wired back to the speaker terminals for door number 1. And our ring common for entrance directory number 1 runs to one side of the buttons at entrance on the buttons of entry directory number 1, and then it is looped through the one side of the buttons to make a continuous wire. And then our individual ring wires go off to each apartment. This part, the blue part here, it doesn't have anything to do with the auto call transfer module. It's the way any 478 system would be wired. So now that we have entrance number 1 wired up, we need to wire up entrance number 2. And surprisingly enough, it's going to be very similar. Down here we have postal lock number 2, and the wires for that wire onto the postal lock terminals for directory number 2. And then we have our door release for door release number 2, which is here. So this is a pair of wires are going to wire down to those terminals. And then we have door speaker number 2, which was brown wires. So that runs from entrance door speaker number 2 here and here. And now our last one is ring common for entrance number 2. And if you were paying attention, you would know that we're going to do it the same way as we did for entrance number 1. We're going to run a wire from the ring common terminal to one side, the left-hand side of the first button, and then we're going to do the same thing we did on the other one. We're going to loop them across each button to make a continuous ring common connection. Okay, so now we have entrance number 2 wired up completely, and now is when it gets a little tricky. So now you've got to pay attention, because this is where you might get lost in this. So let's go ahead and number our buttons so they match. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And we have made all of our normal connections, and I know that all of the different colored wires here looks like somewhat of a jumble, but if you're working on an apartment house intercom system, you're going to get used to working on jumbled up wires, because while this is just drawn on a whiteboard because I can illustrate what to do here, this isn't that different what you find in the real life application. So they're oftentimes very messy, and it's a really good idea to label and number things when you're working on a system like this, so make sure you get things back in the right on the right connections. I like to use these little self-adhesive number label things that they're wire number. You can peel them out and tear them off, and they have numbers on them. And that's a good way. They're wire markers. It's a good thing to have when you're working on systems with a lot of wires. Because here we're only talking about one apartment. I have complexes that I work on that have 200 units per building, and you got a lot of wires to deal with. Anyway, back to the subject at hand. We have our ring common terminal for entry number 2 connected to the left-hand side of button number 1, and then it jumps down to 2, 3, 4, and 5. But we still have to accomplish the other side of the button, the ring wire, to each individual apartment. And you might think that, well, we would do it the same way as we did up here. We would run an individual wire from, say, the right-hand side of button number 1 through the building to apartment number 1 and hook it to the ring terminal, which, yes, in theory you could do that. However, if you imagined that you were wiring a 4-story building with 80 units in it, it would be not only a lot of extra wire to run, but a lot of extra labor involved. Oh, we forgot something. We have to hook up our indicator light. We're going to get back to the ring common thing in just a second because that's important. But we have to hook up our indicator light, and just like we did up here, it's one pair of wires from one side of the indicator to the ground and the other side of the indicator to the lamp terminal. Now our bulb will flash when someone's using the system. Okay, sorry about that. Now, back to our individual ring wires per apartment. We talked about one way of doing it where you could run individual wires throughout the building to every single apartment, but that's not really very practical. It's expensive and labor intensive to do. So the easier and preferred way to do it would be to simply run a multi-wired cable between the two entrances. So what you would do is you would have, let's say you had 5 units, you could use a 5-conductor cable, although you probably would run more than that because there are other things that can be doubled up also. And what you would do is, in this example, you would run a wire from the right-hand side of button number 1 up to the right-hand side of button number 1 at entry number 1. So now when we have, if you follow, we have ring common for directory number 2 goes to the left hand side of the button for apartment number 1. When someone pushes the button, the wire from the right hand side of the button travels up to the right hand side of button number 1 on entrance number 1, and since the wires are essentially spliced together under the screw on the button, it then goes already to apartment number 1 and is connected to the ring terminal. So when someone pushes this button, it makes it back to the correct apartment. And this is how it most commonly would be done because it's less labor and it's less wire, so that means it was less expensive to do. And of course, since we have 5 units in the building altogether, we would repeat this for each of the units. So we would run a wire from the right-hand side of number 2 to the right-hand side of number 2 on entrance number 1, and number 3, and number 4, and number 5. And essentially, we're just looping the 2 directories together. It's not uncommon to do this at all. In fact, it's not uncommon for many of these wires that travel from directory to directory to be looped through the main directory or from the main directory to the second directory. Usually the sensible way to have done it would be you tie the second directory into the first directory and then back to the amplifier and the module. If you think about it, if you wanted to save labor and save wire, since you're already running a trunk full of wires between entrance number 2 and entrance number 1, you could include in that things like the door speaker wires could go with it, the indicator wires could go with it, the postal lock wires could go with it, the door release wires could go with it. So instead of having this convergence of wires coming from different directions, you would have one main umbilical cable. Maybe you would have 20 wires in the cable. You would use some of the wires, some of those 20 wires for the individual ring wires. You could use some of the wires for your indicator lamp. You could use some of the wires for the door speaker. You could use some of the wires for the postal lock. You could use some of those wires for the door release and run them from here to here, and then from this one everything goes back to the directory or to the amplifier. And it's a more sensible approach as long as it's done in a thoughtful, organized, well laid out kind of way. Those 4 things, those are the hardest parts of working on one of these systems because not all of these systems have those 4 things. They're not thought out, they're not well planned, they're not identified, and they're not well done. So sometimes it's a chore. But it's the way a lot of systems would be installed because it was more efficient, and more efficient is code talk for less expensive to have installed. So that is the essential wiring for how you wire up a 2-entry NuTone 478 apartment house entry intercom system, which incorporates the 469 auto call transfer module, the 467 and 468 door timers, where you have 2 entrance directories, 2 intercom entrance speakers, 2 separate postal locks, and 2 separate door releases, and then your whole plethora of apartment speakers throughout the building. So I hope you might have gained some understanding about how a system like this is put together. I would really seriously recommend that you watch the very first video about wiring a 478 apartment house intercom system because it goes over some of the other fundamentals of way a system like this would be installed. But this is how it's done when you have a proper dual entry building with the 468, or I'm sorry, 469 auto call transfer module. So I hope you found this video to be interesting, and perhaps it will help you if you're working on one of these systems. If it did, please give it a thumbs up on YouTube. If you're interested in working on apartment house intercom systems, subscribe to our YouTube channel. There will be more videos. Right now, these are the basic fundamental videos to get you up to speed on how these systems are put together. There will be more troubleshooting and other types of videos coming up. And if you subscribe, you'll get a notification that, hey, there's a new video. So I hope you learned something. That's all for today. See you on the next video.